You will see different countries adopt 5G at a different pace, and that's okay, and that's normal, right? We think that the United States will go first, followed by China, Japan, Korea. Some countries in the Middle East, maybe the Nordics, will be kind of the lead 5G countries. So not everybody will go right away. But actually, when you think about what drives demand for 5G, and what we're seeing is in many parts of the world, it's not just some obscure fourth industrial revolution use case that maybe people don't accept. It's actually consumer demand. I've talked to a number of our customers who basically say, consumer demand for data on my network is growing so fast that I need 5G just to manage that. And the thing that people don't think about so much about 5G is that it's much more efficient. So it lowers the cost per bit of data transmitted. So when you think about emerging markets, actually 5G could be a really good answer because it does provide really high capacity, but much lower cost per actual bit that goes over that network. And that's a powerful thing.
Right now, since you've handled, of course, you have this big bucket that you could dip into for R&D, right, within Nokia. And with the new technologies coming in, your operational costs go a lot lower as time goes by. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but now we have this issue on blockchain that could help with your distribution, your network distribution, and your costs go a lot lower. So in regards to your financials, how flexible are you to invest and reinvest or recapitalize maybe different markets?
I think that we have shown that we have been a big investor in R&D over time. We continue to be, and if you look at the strength of our balance sheet, this is a company that absolutely has the capacity to invest. Take 5G, for example. I won't give you the exact numbers, but I will tell you we are spending a lot of money on the development of 5G. Some in Africa, but mostly in other parts of the world, to be very honest about it.
So in regards to that, when you're looking at the low-hanging fruits, of course, you'll tell us about the 5 drivers that we should see. In emerging markets, what should we prioritize as conversation before we get that as actuality?
I mean,
before we get 5G as on our phones as practical as possible, what should we prioritize as the conversations, maybe the low-hanging fruits?
Well, to be very honest, I mean, I think it is, it gets into kind of somewhat complex telecom stuff, but the whole regulatory environment, right? And if you look at the countries that are moving fast in 5G or are moving fast in terms of data consumption and usage, you see a couple of things. Large markets, small number of strong operators, and a challenger operator who drives the competition. So take the United States. You have a relatively small number of operators, and you have a challenger in the form of T-Mobile that's really driving the market. You take India, which I think is a really interesting example. I mean, if you take India and go back 1 year, since then, the data consumption over mobile networks has increased by something around 150%. The cost has gone down by about 95% per bit. So you have these kind of extraordinary dynamics that are driving the market forward and making connectivity more available. So my point really is that think about the competitive environment that enables that kind of energy in the marketplace and makes connectivity accessible.
All right. There was one question that was raised about we don't need to see every telco have its own mast, right? Which is a valid point. But given that it's an relatively untried and tested market, we are seeing everyone trying to go things their way. I could name all the telcos here, but what is the private sector now doing to advise that? You've touched on it with your previous sentiment, but just give us a bit more.
Yeah, so I guess the question is around kind of consolidation around infrastructure. Yeah. Look, I think it's going to really depend on what, from our perspective anyway, it just depends on what our customers want. We can do it either way. Certainly there are some efficiency gains for bringing things together, and you see the creation of big tower companies and so on that actually bring some efficiencies to that. So I think you can have a number of different models, and frankly, it'll depend on the country, depend on the operator, but all of them can work.
Right. There's a statistic that came out saying we possibly push the investments by about 25%, raising the investments into ICT, but it could maybe make a shift within the GDP 1% within 3 years. So this is not sustainable for smaller companies that might not have the same kind of resources as Nokia. How do you advise them?
How do I advise smaller companies?
Smaller, to at least work within their means.
I would just say be focused. I mean, I think that's one thing, the things we have learned as a big company as well, is that focus really matters. And if you're, particularly if you're a small company in a very competitive technology space where things are changing constantly, stay focused. Don't try to be everything to everybody. Know what you're good at. Do that.
You know why I find a bit of time let me argue with that, because I mean the focus that you had before 5 years ago, a focus on investment, is not the same focus you have now. This has changed, particularly as Nokia.
Yes, but in a very conscious, strategic way. If you go back 5 years ago, if you look at the network side of the Nokia business, we were trying to do a lot of different things. And we actually at that time exited a lot of businesses. We basically said this one, we're subscale, this one, we don't earn sustainable profitability, and became a very focused mobile network company. Right. Since then, we went and we acquired Alcatel-Lucent, and we became a much more broad portfolio company, but we're still very focused. If you think about, our customers that we target, the vast majority of our business today comes from big telco operators, although we are growing very fast in some very select enterprise segments.